You're listening to QSBS Solved, where we share insights for founders and investors looking to maximize their business's growth, exit opportunities, and tax savings. Our team at QSBSrollover.com offers specialized services to help you benefit from owning qualified small business stock. Our podcast guests are leaders in their respective fields and work on every side of the startup journey to help founders and investors win. The ideas and opinions shared here are not investment, tax, or legal advice. Reach out and we'd be happy to connect you with a qualified advisor or tax counsel. For now, enjoy today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of QSBS Solved. My name is Brady. I'm joined live in studio by Jonathan Fish, the CEO of Cap Gains and QSBSexpert.com, where you may see a lot of his writing and resources on QSBS. Jonathan, how you doing?
Great to be with you, Brady. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we've known each other actually since probably just around the beginning of my, call it QSBS journey, when our firm really started digging into QSBS and services for founders. And it's hard to miss you out in the QSBS ecosystem because you search QSBS anything and QSBS Expert comes up with one of your resources or guides. So yeah, you provide a lot of good education.
Yeah, we got a similar start, I guess, that way. We started our journey with the website QSBSrollover.com and kind of saw the need. I mean, really before that, by way of background, I'm a CPA. It worked in public accounting for about 18 years, mostly working with private equity and venture funds. And it was really there that I learned about QSBS and saw a lot of the nuances, the complications, also what a great benefit it is, and how hard it is to get help. And so that led me to end up starting the website and then QSBSexpert.com. And then really the sort of like inbound traffic and questions that we were getting dictated a lot of what we ended up doing next, which was to develop ways to help shareholders and venture funds and companies, work through the nuances of QSBS and ultimately gather all the right data to help support eligibility. When they have an exit, there's some inherent data challenges, as since you need data from the company that's issuing stock and a lot of the companies as they grow larger want to share less and less. But so like how to kind of work through all those challenges and get everyone the data that they need.
Yeah, it's a personal exemption. It's something that the individual taxpayer claims, but it is largely dependent on things that their company has done, which, individual employees, shareholders may not have had any insight into. Or so yeah, there definitely is a bit of a data misalignment issue at times.
Yeah, and that's what kind of intrigued me most. Like when a bunch of the people that reached out to us early on our website, and still the same type of challenges we're seeing, but where people that should be able to benefit from this tax incentive, like they got involved in these companies, really kind of abiding by all the right measures, to try to get QSBS stock. And then when it came time to an exit or the company IPO'd, the company's lawyers were telling them, well, don't share anything. You don't want to give tax advice, so the companies get more and more risk adverse, with what they're sharing. Really at the expense of these early shareholders who in many ways should be able to benefit, from QSBS. So that intrigued me early on and, trying to help solve that problem. As we've grown, we primarily work with venture capital funds now to help. Same type of thing. Like there are measures that a fund could take early on and throughout its holding period to help make sure that they could maximize or optimize for the benefits of QSBS. So that's a lot of what we do now, both through kind of a software element through our platform, and then also through services, that complement that software approach.
Well, around the time you started your career, I guess at PwC or maybe just after, was really when QSBS got some teeth to it, right? in 2011 time period. Were you at PwC for a few years before that?
I was. I actually started there in 2002. Knew nothing about QSBS. But then, it started to hear about it more. Certainly after 2010. I mean, for me, it was later where I was starting to get questions from some of our venture fund clients, or at least, kind of filter their questions through me for the PwC tax department about QSBS and like these seemingly complicated situations that they were running into. And, there's certainly a lot of nuance to all the QSBS criteria, and a lot of questions don't really have a right or wrong. It's just like, well, what is the situation? What, and how do you work through it? And so that's really a lot of what I was encountering, and, some of those complicated questions that I'm trying to figure out. Well, who knows this stuff, and how do you help get these clients the right support?
Yeah. What part of your platform did you initially set out to build? Because when we met, there was mainly like QSBS Expert and all the educational materials, but you were also working on sort of the QSBS tracking and documentation substantiation platform. I know that you're still building. What was the initial idea when you set out to start creating QSBS content? What did you envision trying to create out of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it really kind of boiled down to there are tripwires and opportunities with QSBS. And how do you avoid the tripwires, whether you're a company or investor or venture fund, in our case, or on the opportunity side, how do you see some of these opportunities? It could be rollover opportunities, or it could be deal structuring opportunities. To make sure that it could benefit from QSBS, both when it's set up, whether it's the fund being set up or a particular investment that the fund's making, or at exit, how do you optimize for this? And that's really, and the thinking with our platform hasn't really deviated. The methods we've taken to get there have changed as technology has advanced a lot in the last few years, and we got started about 5 years ago. So there's been the whole shift with AI and development in general. But the kind of core concept has stayed pretty much intact. And it's not just QSBS, there are other tax incentives as well that a lot of shareholders have no idea that they qualify for, and a lot of companies that issue stock, don't really know about. So it's also similarly with opportunity zones. It's like, well, you could situate your company in an opportunity zone and be an opportunity zone business. And there are 8,700 opportunity zones around the country, and just kind of understanding some of the basics and how it could apply to your business could help you in making strategic decisions that doesn't necessarily get you capital, but it's helpful in fundraising, or helpful in, if an investor is comparing two companies and one could qualify for some of these benefits and one can't, it's certainly a nice feather in your cap. So, our original thinking was really around a lot of those ideas, just that there are these great incentives government creates. They want you to use them, and, it's a lot of people just didn't know about it. A lot of people have heard more about QSBS over the last few years, and it's become more commonplace. It's still always surprised, that there are certainly folks out there that don't know about it, who work in this space, and so there's still an educational component, not just to the awareness, but then also how to deal with some of the nuance.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we saw that there was the obvious education gap, which, I think is clear based on, especially for QSBS, based on the number of folks that we talk to, and they're like, yeah, I've heard of it, don't really know much about it. But there's also a gap, like you sort of started to touch on, in advisors and service providers actually helping people maximize those benefits, take advantage of them, put together, like you said, maybe like get all your data organized in the right way. And so, yeah, two big gaps: education and actually having advisors or service providers to help people walk through it.
Yeah. And when we look at funds, we think about it in the different phases of a fund. So from the fund being set up, like how's the fund structured? We've talked to funds who, they make an investment, like especially as SPVs have grown. So rather than a fund raising capital and then deploying it to a bunch of investments, some funds are structured where they'll go deal by deal through an SPV structure. And so we've seen some that are set up where they'll make the investment and then sell it to new partners. And so have partners join after the fund is already created, which is a tripwire for QSBS. Yet, like for funds, like a partner has to be part of the fund when the fund acquires the QSBS stock. So there are some structural considerations like that. Then, also like knowing who in your fund, like which of your GP members, LP members, who stands to benefit from QSBS. Maybe you have endowments or foundations or corporations that are the main partners in the fund, and they all don't stand to benefit, or foreign investors, because QSBS only applies to U.S. taxpayers. So just knowing who stands to benefit, what you're doing to track this, how you're set up, is all kind of early on for funds. And then we look at from when a fund makes a new investment throughout their holding period, and then planning for an exit and post-exit, which is especially where interesting rollover opportunities could exist. So really helping throughout that life cycle of the fund.
When you, maybe we can focus on the two different cohorts. One, we see founders most of the time, work with founders most often, and you work a lot with funds, which is just less part of our business in the rollover world right now. But let's talk through like early, maybe setting up a company for a founder. What are, the two things that people ask you most about in your mind? And, what's maybe one set of guiding principles that they should take with them when they're just thinking about, hey, how do I make sure from day one that I'm maximizing whatever my opportunity is here for fundraising and otherwise?
Yeah. Well, along those lines, we see a lot of, really all of the QSBS criteria have associated tripwires, but like early on, for founders, it's things like, were you founded as a C Corp, or did you convert from another entity type like an LLC or an S Corp to a C Corp? And how was that done? And, we've seen situations where the leader investors get the benefit of QSBS because the company's then a clean C Corp. But for the founders, if the company started as an S Corp and converted, depending on how they effectuated that conversion, the founders may not be in a position to benefit from QSBS. And so it's always a shame to have to tell them as they're working through a sale that, oh, your Series A investors all get QSBS, but you as the founder 5 years earlier, don't actually get these benefits. So that's one. We've seen a couple of situations in just the last week where a company was started and for whatever reason, the founders didn't issue equity to themselves. Some of it's from using some like online services to set up their company and not attorneys. And, and so either just as a mistake or they kind of thought they were doing it strategically. However, the QSBS doesn't start until your stock is issued. And so they're kind of, there are a few things you could do to kind correct for that. So it's important to issue equity, and to be set up correctly from the start, for QSBS. And set up correctly, it doesn't mean you have to be a C Corp right at the start. However, making sure if you go through the conversion or, that you're taking all the right steps at that time to make sure that the conversion's properly done.
Yeah. Well, I would also say if you're a company with, like, just say more than one founder, so you have two founders, to whatever it is that you do early on, do it together as best as possible. Probably makes things a lot simpler in the future. If you do, maybe you didn't get everything exactly right from like a corporate structuring standpoint in the first couple months, but it's a lot easier to sort through that when you do formalize, if you're establishing an entity together, your own bank accounts together, doing all that stuff together versus like just one guy and working with his buddy somewhere.
Yeah. It probably helps to work together and also to work with, helpful advisors, people that know what they're doing in this area. I mean, one of the things that we do, which we actually make free on our platform, is like a somewhat high level but early stage diagnostic. So to look at a company and say, well, does it kind of fit the bill for QSBS? Are there risk factors present that could cause this company not to qualify? And so that's something that we could do early on and help investors make sure that they're on the right track, to benefiting from QSBS, or rather help founders make sure that they're on the right track. So in effect, what we'll do is we'll run this diagnostic and then we'll walk the company through it and, clarify any sort of open questions that were raised. And it's also, in effect, like providing an education for them about the things to think about with QSBS and how they could stay on top of it to help themselves and their shareholders, get the benefit.
Yeah, we see a lot of the tripwires that come up in maybe the middle or late stages, just by nature of the type of services that we offer with rollovers. And a lot of them focus around maybe the company doing weird things with regard to buybacks and redemptions, or maybe one executive buying the shares of another executive and thinking that they're going to get QSBS on that. Or even the restructurings that you talked about. We see a lot of companies maybe based in Canada or overseas, maybe in Europe somewhere, and wanting to establish or already have maybe a U.S. corporation, but none of their stock was issued from the U.S. corporation. They're trying to raise money now. A lot of those types of issues. Maybe then let's jump to the end of the life cycle, though, where someone is in a position where they're able to sell stock. That could be during a funding round. Maybe it's a founder, being able to take some secondary during a transaction, or maybe there's a full M&A process that's being run and they're about to get liquid on a lot of stock, founders, investors, whoever. What's something that, if you don't have your data sort of all neat and tidied up, what are the best steps you can take in the later stages of the game, you think, to pull everything together in a timely manner?
Well, I'd say like that's a lot of where we come in, is pulling all that data together, and we prepare what we call a compilation to really compile all the right data, run a series of tests to see over the course of the company's history if the QSBS criteria appear to have been met, and then look at, well, which securities does this apply to? And, are there security specific considerations, and then shareholder specific considerations, for the shareholders of those securities. So, to your point, it's much better to do this ahead of the sale than after. You might lose access to information after you sell the company, or maybe there could be some cleanup in various ways. Maybe that you do now to get all your ducks in a row and help make sure that you have the right support in place. And it's also strategic. QSBS has this interesting element where one of the things that we find ahead of deals is just knowing which shareholders could benefit from QSBS. Maybe like you mentioned, two co-founders. We've had situations where one co-founder is a U.S. taxpayer, the other one's a non-U.S. taxpayer, a foreigner. And so they have different perspectives on caring about QSBS, or maybe a co-founder was admitted later. We've seen that situation too. And so, it plays a role in negotiations, both internally, between the shareholders that could benefit from QSBS and those that can, and even if there are ways to help the ones that don't benefit from QSBS benefit in other ways in the deal, and help the ones that do actually realize that maybe the deal's being planning to be closed a month before the 5-year holding period's met for QSBS. It was, the pre-One Big Beautiful Bill stock, stuff like that. So it's the type of thing, like, you want to not just know if you qualify, but also like who stands to benefit, what sort of risks there are to not being eligible, and know all that ahead of any transaction.
Well, it's worth noting too that even though we're talking about sort of what are the best practices for getting everything tied up in a neat little bow, have all your information available to you, there is no form that you fill out or real boxes that you check to be QSBS eligible, in quotes.
Yeah.
You can not have any information and still make the claim for the exemption on your tax return. Now, it's better to have a bunch of substantiating materials, no doubt, but there is no sort of magic form that you file by this date and that makes you QSBS.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure the listeners understand that, so that, if you're in a position where it feels like all hope is lost for getting some of those key materials back, there are ways to back into, justifying or substantiating your QSBS position, even if you don't have access to all the right documents.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we find that as well. There's a level of diligence that anybody could do, with whatever level of data you have. I mean, if you're a shareholder in a company, you're most likely going to have a security purchase agreement. So, we start there and then look at attributes of that security. How'd you acquire it? When did you acquire it? What type of security is it? Is it equity for QSBS purposes? Did you obtain it directly from the company? Stuff like that. As well as attributes of the company, which there's a lot of data out there, that's public that you could pull together. And that's effectively what we do in our diagnostic, is pull data from all various sources, whether it's funding round information, SEC filings, registration information for companies, and to really put a picture together to say, well, is there any reason to think that this company is not QSBS eligible? And so we go about that and put a report together to substantiate it. But as you were saying, you don't, at the end of the day, you could claim QSBS, but there are a couple of levels of review. One is just your internal comfort. If you're claiming this huge exclusion on your tax return, the IRS does have 6 years to audit you, and you could be penalized and owe interest as well. So you want to be able to sleep at night. You want to have some comfort that you're rightfully taking claiming this benefit. But then also, it's not just the IRS, it's also your tax preparer and getting them comfortable. And so we find our analyses work well in that capacity to help. A lot of tax preparers aren't that well versed in QSBS. They might not see a lot of situations of QSBS claims. So, and there's a lot more that they have to think about as well. There's state level requirements for or treatment at the state level for whoever, their client, as well as, the rest of their tax return. So it's, if you could bring your tax preparer a report that says, well, not only do I think this is QSBS, but I actually went through an exercise to substantiate it. Here's all the information you need. The tax preparers are a lot more comfortable making that claim on behalf of their clients. So that's one. And then, like I was saying, a lot of our work is with venture funds, and they serve an interesting role here because the fund doesn't directly benefit from QSBS.
Right.
It's all of their partners. And so they're kind of a middleman. The fund has the relationship with the company. They also have access to different levels of information depending on their information rights. But for their investors, their limited partners, their general partners look to the fund to help them understand if it could be QSBS. And so that's the K1 reporting requirements. K1s are the actually a tax form that funds provide to their partners with all the activity for the year, with the capital gains and other activity. And the reporting requirements expanded a couple of years ago to provide more transparency for funds to report out QSBS gains. And interestingly, there are a few different categories and ways that QSBS gains are tagged on K1s. And so you could have a 1202 gain, that where it's met the holding period requirement, or you could have a rollover, and it could be a rollover that the fund made a reinvestment on behalf of the partners, or it could be a rollover where the fund is providing an opportunity to their partners to make a reinvestment themselves. And that's where we've seen some interesting opportunities as well with rollovers for funds. Like we've seen situations where we've working with a venture fund. They might have multiple funds within their complex. So maybe they had a gain in the first fund, and but it wasn't held for the required 5-year holding period for QSBS. Mm-hmm. So maybe they were done making investments out of that fund by then, but they made an investment from another fund in their portfolio within the 60-day window of the 1045 rollover window. And, even without intending it to be a QSBS rollover, the partners who participated in both deals could actually consider it and report it as a 1045 rollover and have some of that benefit of the tax deferral and ultimately exclusion. So we find there are a lot of strategic ways for funds to utilize QSBS, and the more funds are looking out for the interests of their investor base, the happier everybody is, and right. It's a win-win situation. So, it's Are you talking to identifying those opportunities?
Are you talking to a lot of LPs who are coming to you asking, hey, like, I don't know what's going on at this XYZ fund that I'm involved with? Or is it a lot of the fund managers coming to you and saying, hey, our LPs are asking about this, what do we do? Or maybe some of both?
Yeah, it's definitely both. It's we've certainly seen it go both ways. More so, for us, like the venture funds that they have a CFO or tax director, they're usually the ones tasked with monitoring QSBS, and it's one element of everything that they have to do. So we're work hands-on with them and help them stay on top of this for their fund. But to your point, like a lot of, in some cases, the GP of the fund is looking into QSBS, or LPs in funds, want to make sure that the funds are staying on top of this for their own benefit. And so we actually enable through our platform LPs to be able to invite their fund, and inform them of the importance of tracking QSBS. So we've seen it go the other way. We've seen funds report gains to their LPs, and the LPs say, wait a minute, shouldn't this have been QSBS? And, so funds don't want to be in a position like that where
we don't give tax advice,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's just, QSBS was really in many ways created for the venture industry and to encourage what they're doing. So it's in funds' best interest to look, be on top of these sort of opportunities for their investors.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, the platform that you've built, are you calling it QSBS 2.0? Is that what you're calling the software? I was looking on capgains.com, your site, or I guess, do you have another?
Well, one of the funds, like we created a QSBS 2.0, referring to the One Big Beautiful Bill changes, like a hub to help.
Oh, okay. I see.
Help people think through the various nuances of the rule changes. And, even today, it's September 2nd, it's a couple of months after the rules were introduced, there are a lot of open questions with when you just kind of take the word in.
Yeah, as it is, and trying to interpret that, that leave a lot of folks confused. And you really have to understand the history. Where were the old rules? What are they now? What was the intent of these changes? And so we're expecting more regulations from, not just regulations, but like clarification from the IRS on some of these things, like some of the basics. How do you calculate the gain exclusion now? And things like that the wording leaves some open questions about. So that's why we created the QSBS 2.0 hub. But for our platform, it's our corporate entity is Cap Gains Inc. So we have capgains.com, and we call it the Cap Gains platform for now. And part of it is that our thought process is like there are any of these tax incentives where, like QSBS, where the company has to do certain things, shareholder has to do certain things, but all the benefit really goes to the individual shareholders, are the types of tax incentives that we're mostly focused on. So whether it's QSBS, opportunity zones, different states have angel investment tax credits. The original QSBS was actually started in 1958, section 1244 of the tax code, which provides a capital loss benefit, which unfortunately wasn't expanded in the One Big Beautiful Bill. But but we've seen situations, especially for like angel investors, where they could benefit from that, but they're just not being made aware of it. And so we called it Cap Gains to as an umbrella for all those types of encompass that, right?
Different tax incentives. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, again, people can go to your QSBSexpert.com for a whole hub of resources for both changes at the federal level, different rules by state, which is super helpful. And we actually use a lot checking up on some of the state requirements. And then capgains.com to see your platform for funds, especially to help people substantiate and document and get all their data in one place. People can find you there. Jonathan, thanks for joining. Appreciate you sharing and spending the time.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me on. And excited to see where things go next in the QSBS world.
Yep, 3.0 coming up 10 years from now. So. All right. All right. Thanks, Jonathan. See you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of QSBS Solved. We hope to hear from you soon. Remember that the content shared on QSBS Solved is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal, tax, or investment advice. While we discuss strategies related to qualified small business stock, or QSBS, including rollover planning, listeners should consult their own tax, legal, and financial advisors before making any decisions. Laws and interpretations can change. Individual circumstances do vary.